Good afternoon. Nice to have you. All right. So as I'm getting your names down, today we will be dealing with test number 2. Okay. Now, I can be talked into a couple of those that I have not bold-faced, but the ones that I have chosen not to boldface, I am initially thinking about not covering them because I believe the answers are pretty clear from your argumentative assignments, that you could pretty clearly glean them from it. As it's also the second test as opposed to the first. I don't normally like to go through the whole test with you. But if anything was even questionable, even remotely left up to my own lecture, supplemental to these assignments, I kept boldface so that we would cover them. All right. So hopefully you feel better about this assignment, about this test after today's Zoom meeting. All right. So have your names down. Right. I'm going to go ahead and share the page with test number 2. Pardon me. All right. So beginning, right? What we do is we begin with America's War for Independence, right? And with America's War for Independence, I try to give you context as to like the political legacies, the culture, the conflicts, the power dynamics, the economy, etc. That are developing in the early Republic of the United States as they begin to the destinies twine with those of Mexican Americans. Okay, so the first 3 I have in the War for Independence handout, and each is a different section thesis. Okay, so remember, even if you didn't do any of these as your choice of the assignment, Bernard Bailyn is number 2 on that handout. It's kind of the romantic one of the founding fathers and the role of the Enlightenment, etc. Paul Johnson is the British. He gives the British perspective that we were neglected, but it had a healthy or salutary effect upon us, and we fought to keep a good thing going. And Howard Zinn has that very cynical Marxist thesis that the American intelligentsia and political elite had their own agenda, right? They wanted to kick out the British to be the top dog standing, and they wanted to deflect the poor's wrath toward the well-to-do and make a perfect and convenient scapegoat of the British. Okay, so those are the 3 theses. I did it quickly, but you should be able to discern those from your handout. All right. I said this, but I said it relatively quickly. Guadalupe Victoria, elected at the time of Mexico's establishment of its liberal federal republic of 1824, was stated to have been the only Mexican leader for some time to serve his full term without a coup, without a blow to the state, right? That is true. Okay, he was elected from 1824 to 1828, served his full 4-year term, and scarcely anyone did until after the War of Reform in 1861. Okay, so a lot of, kind of in political instability in Mexico. All right, my contrast with the U.S. and with Mexico, that is found in the Tale of Two Early Republics. And I have a theme about the founding fathers and about the gap between the liberals and the conservatives amongst the founding fathers versus that gap found with those in Mexico, and how that led to American stability and Mexican instability. All right, like I said, I could be suckered into doing that one, but it's right out of the handout. That's why I didn't keep it boldface. All right. So the ideological gap between the founding fathers, I made it very clear. I thought relatively that it was narrow. Remember? And really, in a sense, I'm giving you number 5 right now as well, is that the gap, I think, was relatively narrow. I made the argument those on the left were not that far on the left of the spectrum. Those far on the right were not that far on the right of the spectrum in America. And I say that they engaged in hyperbole. They engaged in deliberate strategic exaggeration, right? Where they said, "Don't vote for John Adams. He's going to become the new monarch of the U.S. Don't vote for Thomas Jefferson. He's going to establish the French Revolution here in the U.S." Well, they didn't even come close to that. And I think the founding fathers knew it deep down. And so hence there were peaceful transitions of power between conservatives and liberals in early U.S. history, because they knew they really weren't that far from each other on the ideological spectrum. All right. And I say that was not the case with Mexico. They were much further apart, the left and right. Which was not included in the process of America becoming a giant. I have these in it, actually. I almost took the bullface off this, but just to make sure you remember, Hamilton's system, right, his bank, subsidizing those who were opening up new industries, subsidizing those who were building infrastructure, taking loans through bond certificates from the rich. All of that supposedly had some long-term effects that were favorable to the U.S. becoming an economic giant. The judicial branch, I mentioned at least 3 major decisions that were made to make a business safe environment for entrepreneurs, for business owners. Okay, so that one's also true. And then look at the bottom one, a virtually bipartisan, right? So bi meaning both or two, both liberals and conservatives at the end of the War of 1812. They came to a consensus in the name of patriotism after we fought the British again in the War of 1812, that we needed to become an economic self-sufficient giant. And so even the liberal Democrats voted for the maintenance of Hamilton's system, his economic system. So the one that does not fit is C, the Federalist domination of national politics. They dominated just the first 2 presidencies. And then remember, Thomas Jefferson and Madison and Monroe were all Democrats. Madison switched parties. All right. Number 8. How were some Jacksonian era changes that were brought about during the 1830s, the late 1820s and the early 1830s, the time of Andrew Jackson? How did those changes adversely affect Hispanics when it comes to the American takeover? So you see here, enfranchisement, that just means inclusion into citizenship. Enfranchisement of virtually all WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant men. And it begs the question if politicians did not feel beholden to cater to popular aspirations and prejudices. And you should have found that on number 1 of the antebellum westward expansion handout. Number 2, B, elected judges would find it more difficult to turn down their constituents' pleas for squatters' rights when they trespassed upon Latinos' large estates. That is also equally true. Many local judge positions became elected. And that was the reason why the founding fathers didn't want judges to be elected, was that sometimes the right decision is not the popular decision, right? And that as long as they're serving for life, they don't have to make popular decisions. They can make the wise decisions and not worried about, what the majority of people are trying to pressure them to do. Because sometimes the majority can be wrong, right? And we see that with Andrew Jackson's time period. You see it with slaves. You see it with the loss of Mexican Texas. And you see it with the Trail of Tears with the Native Americans. C, squatters' rights, right? Trespassing on other people's territory. If that land was not being cultivated and the squatter or trespasser came and improved it, that squatter increasingly, through the organic process of the judicial system, right, like a living organism that grows and evolves, they began to grant that opportunity to poor squatters, and likely for their votes. All right, because in the past, under English common law, it doesn't matter. If you are the proprietor of that land, you can let it lay fallow all you want. It's your land. So this is a kind of a deviation from English common law. So all of those are true. All those are going to hurt Mexican Americans. Okay, American court history of Santa Anna and the 2 combined states at that time of Tejas y Coahuila. highlights the ultra-conservative constitutions of Santa Anna that deprive people in Mexican states of much local autonomy and representative government. That is absolutely true. Because remember, American court history praises things American and American leaders. So the guys at the Alamo in American court history are viewed as these liberty-loving libertarians who wanted no big government and defiantly but heroically were virtually martyred at the Alamo by Santa Anna and his forces. However, Chicano history, it highlights B, Gringo defiance of Mexican law in Stephen Austin's realm in eastern Texas. We talked about that regarding slaves illegally brought in there. We talked about that with their refusal to pay taxes, their illegal trade with nearby Louisiana without first allowing themselves to be taxed by Mexican officials, their failure to learn Spanish and become Roman Catholic, which they had promised to do, defiance of all such things. And also the Fredonian Revolt. They tried to break free before the Alamo, before they had an excuse of Santa Anna's, his siete leyes, his 7-law constitution that was so uber conservative. And then 12, this was lecture, I believe, and not so much written. John C. Fremont's entrance into Mexican California on his second and third topographical expeditions, as well as his meeting with Archibald Gillespie, has provoked historical interpretations of the American government's imperialist designs on California amidst the drama with Mexico. And that is absolutely true. All right. Like Lewis and Clark, he was granted a topographical expedition to learn about the flora and fauna, the Native American cultures, etc., in the far west. And he went past the Sierra Nevada mountains illegally into Mexican California with an American military uniform on, being employed by the American Armed Forces. And the first time he had paperwork that said he can go into Nevada and said that they were being chased by the Shoshone natives and they were out of victuals, out of food and water. But the second and third, he had no such viable paperwork nor worthy excuses. So it looked as if he was spying on Mexican California. And then when he got kicked out the third time, he went to the Oregon border and met with Archibald Gillespie, who we know now was an American spy, telling him for the America's designs to wrest California from Mexico as soon as they began fighting in Mexico proper in the Mexican-American War of 1846. Mountain men were depicted as would-be capitalists of the far west, helping to popularize the region and overland trails. I'm definitely giving you that one. That is true, because I had a section that sometimes I include in the antebellum westward expansion movement. I just felt badly that some of these sections are so long and you have a limited time to read all of them. I just chose for that reason to leave that section out. But it would have been found in that section had I included it. And absolutely. So Jedediah Smith, Kit Carson, these other mountain men, they began getting paid to tell their stories. So people write books about their exploits. They were paid to become scouts, to take people safely, supposedly, through the far west to settle in Oregon country and in the Sacramento Valley, where Johann von Sutter, or John Sutter, was supposed to be keeping the gringos at bay for Mexican California. Right. The Bear Flag Revolt lecture brought to mind Vallejo's dilemma. Remember, he was a comandante general of the Mexican troops here in California. Brought to mind his dilemma, and that his liberal education suggested that multiculturalism and economic diversity and enterprise brought by gringo immigrants would bring many benefits, while his gut told him to beware. That is absolutely true. Okay. B, implied skepticism or doubt of John C. Fremont's and Thomas Oliver Larkin's denial of having planned to participate in the gringo takeover of Mexican California, the Bear Flag Revolt. That is also true. And C, contended that while Mexican political opposition in the Bay Area was reportedly weak, those in Los Angeles put up a good fight. The Californios, the Mexican Americans. Frederick Jackson Turner's thesis, Hispanics in the West, that is out of the antebellum westward expansion movement. Okay, that's why I took the boldface off those. They can be found right in the handout. Okay, just in case, if I had any doubt at all that it's in there, I kept it bold. What do the historical sources bring to light concerning typical Hispanic responses to their plight? A, that some fought within the system as capitalists or even politicians trying to succeed and or help others of their demographic, and that others fought beyond the system like social bandits. That is very true. Esteban Ochoa, the Mexican mayor of Tucson, Arizona, was very adamantly in favor of, quote, his people, and he repeatedly was reelected. You had the Gorras Blancas, the White Hats, ran people for office in Texas and New Mexico and did well representing their people. And then you also had the social bandits like Joaquin Murrieta, that Zorro was named after. And I can't think of the other guy, the guy that was for theft and they ended up hanging him in San Jose. Shoot, it's bothering me. Sorry, I can't remember his name, but there were some famous ones. B, that they maintain their culture very well. Absolutely. So both A and B are true. And then 20 is a little bit redundant. Vallejo was depicted as a Mexican, then American leader, caught between two worlds. One cosmopolitan, right, where you're a citizen of the whole world and you're inclusive. World open to future changes. Another of Anglo domination over Hispanics. That is also true. Number 21 is found on number 1 of the antebellum westward expansion movement when I played the blame game as to who was to blame for the Mexican-American War. You want to take a look at that. 22, American victory in the Mexican-American War was attributed to America's dual invasion beginning in Coahuila in the north and in Veracruz in the south. Brilliant maneuvers at places like Cerro Gordo, and technological and industrial might. Absolutely true. B, Mexican leaders were depicted as having, quote, shot themselves in the foot on several occasions and levels. That is equally true. So they're both true as options A and B. All right. The Wilmot Proviso, that said, okay, that in the land we're about to take from Mexico, because it was evident at that time in 1847 that America was going to win militarily this war. He stated, whatever land we're going to take from in the far west from Mexico, we ought to prohibit slavery in those new territories. And it started fistfights in Congress, right? Because can you spread slavery? Right? That was the key to the Civil War. So at any rate, some people contending that it was like taking this land from Mexico, like there was a bit of karma to it, bullying this land from Mexico, and then the very next generation fights one another and kills one another in a civil war over slavery in these new areas. So that is true. 25, how did Mexican Americans lose a lot of their land? Despite the fact that the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo guaranteed on paper they could maintain their citizenship and their property, right? A, American requirements for proof of property ownership were tough to meet. Absolutely. They wanted latitude and longitude lines. They wanted permanent boundaries. They wanted signatures of the political elites with the years put on them. And a lot of the Mexican Americans didn't have that. They hadn't maintained that paperwork. Squatting rights over unused land, as we've already talked about. Because remember, a lot of the Mexican landowners in New Mexico and in California were pastoral. They had like cattle and sheep, etc. And so when you went to a certain part of their land, they didn't have it fenced off often, and it was hard to tell what they owned and what they didn't own. And so if no crops are growing, these gringo squatters just came in and started carving up pieces of their lands. And unfortunately, elected judges felt the pressure to grant squatters' rights to a lot of them and take parcels of land from the Latino owners. C, many judges were now popularly elected and they felt pressure, yes, to side with the numerically larger Anglos who flooded in because of the gold rush. D, many Anglo lawyers and corporate farmers and ranchers were greedy and corrupt. Absolutely. So some lawyers had such high fees that even when the Latinos won in court, they had to put their property down as collateral to pay those lawyer fees. And if they couldn't, the lawyer would take their land, ironically, after defending them for their land in court. And then you had ranchers like Ben Stillman in Texas who would repeatedly put the owner of the Rancho del Espiritu Santo, he continually put him in court to contest his lands, even though everyone knew that the Spanish gentleman had the proper paperwork to prove it, but he did it to bleed him dry with court fees. So all of the above is correct. All right, so then discrimination of Mexican Americans is found in number 3 of the antebellum westward assignment. And then court history of the Civil War is found in number 1 of the Civil War and Reconstruction one. Revisionist is found in number 2. So right out of those. Then what did I put here? Radical Republicans were depicted in the handout, just in case it's not amply clear in that handout. Solely in the likeness of William Dunning. William Dunning said that there was such racism in the North and such indifference, genuine indifference about the plight of African Americans and slaves, that the North did what it did to end slavery to try to weaken and punish the South, not for the right reasons. That's Dunning's thesis. So did I depict only that? Did I depict only the court history of them as these crusaders that were idealistically bent to change the world and improve America's institutions? Okay, I put that as well. And then look at C. As a mixed bag of bold and altruistic idealism. Altruistic is you're worrying, you're humanitarian and worried about the needs of a less fortunate demographic. And idealism is you want to improve the world. But also vindictiveness and limited zeal. That's the one that I tried to convey when you put them all together in the Civil War handout, was C. They sure as heck weren't libertarians. They wanted bigger government. So Dunning's thesis, African American agency, is found in Reconstruction, one of the two. Contributions to Reconstruction is found in 1 and 2 on Reconstruction. Well, if they're combined with Civil War, I guess they would be 3 and 4 on yours. Alleged reasons for the failure of Reconstruction. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to show, and I'm going to do the same thing as soon as we're done with the test, America's political traditions, their cultural legacies of how they treat minority groups, how they treat people of color. That's why we're doing this, okay? So just as we're dealing with the African Americans right now and Jim Crow, we're going to deal with the new immigrants, as they were generically called, right after this test, namely like the Italians coming in and how they were mistreated. Okay, so you're looking for the one that doesn't fit. The financial stress of establishing economic development and state-funded institutions, yes, that helped ruin the Reconstruction of the South. They had great ideas, a lot of programs to help the less fortunate, but they ran out of money. That's found in the first of the 2 Reconstruction sections. Look at C, Southern opposition in the press about Negro misrule and corruption. Absolutely. That's found also on the first of 2 sections on Reconstruction. A loss of Northern public interest? Yes. And President Rutherford B. Hayes' compromise to get the troops out of the South, if he could be chosen the president, That is true as well. So the one that does not fit is B, the presidential election of a white Southern Democrat. Okay. So does anybody have any questions? So the 14th Amendment is found in the Reconstruction ones. And then the last assignment, I just did one question, and it should be pretty easy. The instructor subjectively stated that in the mid-19th century, the Mexican Catholic Church served as an impediment to liberal growth and thereby made Mexico's path to modernization more painful. As you probably know, as you've just done this, that's exactly what I intended to convey. The Catholic Church on the wrong side of modernization in the mid 1800s. Okay, so you guys have any questions or comments? Tell you what, I'll give you one more. Polk decided to what course of action regarding the gold rush? To ban Mexican immigration and expel all Mexican Americans? No, he didn't go that far. To postpone infiltration into California until the Land Surveying Office and authorities prepared the state for immigration? That's what he was supposed to do, but he did not. But C, to allow trespassing in newly American California, which arguably led to the ensuing scramble. That is the one that's true, is C on number 23. Right? Because they're supposed to put everything into 6-acre square plots, so many of those into a city, so many of those into a county, so many of those into a state. And then they're to publicly auction the land for public sale in consumption. They are to establish municipal, county, and state level institutions like police forces, etc. It's all known as the Northwest Ordinances that our founding fathers established. That was supposed to be followed when you are taking a region from a mere territory, preparing it for statehood, to be annexed as an actual state. But Polk, he ignored all that. And he contributed to the problem and just said, go take what you guys can get. And he created this rat race. And that's what led to Frederick Jackson Turner's thesis, right? This Wild West image where you had no law and order in the local mines. Racism ran rampant, especially when the Chileans and the Sonorans from Mexico came with such expertise and experience in mining and came and began to enrich themselves. There was a grand sense of this racist envy. Like, hey, we just beat you guys in the Mexican-American War. We won this land fair and square. This gold is supposed to be the spoils for us, not you. And notice I said beat you guys, and I included Chileans, because in their ignorance, they were calling all Hispanics, all Latinos, they're putting them under one generic umbrella. All right. So do you guys feel better about this test now? Anybody? Are you guys still? Did I not make anything clear? Did I not make something sufficiently clear? By all means, please feel free to unmute yourself or write something. So I can only know what you guys tell me. All right. All right. Well, I haven't heard anything, but like I said, I went over more for a test two than I almost ever do in my US or Mexican American classes. I felt like I owed that to you. For one, I never gave you a study guide for test two, and I apologize for that. But like I said, all the ones that are not bold, I feel like they are pretty clearly um, extrapolated from the argumentative assignments. You just go back over that section and read it, and you should easily get the answer. All right. Okay, guys, you guys are awfully quiet today, but I'm going to go ahead and let you go, okay? You have until the 15th to do this, I believe. And I also gave you 2 chances. You get 2 goes at it. And the Canvas system will obviously accept your higher of your 2 scores. Right. All right, you guys take care, okay? Good luck.